The Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 25th chapter, beginning at the 14th verse. Jesus tells a parable about his second coming, indicating that it is not sufficient merely to maintain things as they are. Those who await his return should make good use of the gifts that God has provided them. Jesus said to his disciples, "For it is if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I've made 5 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, and good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. I have made 2 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, 'Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours.' But the master replied, 'You wicked and lazy slave. You knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return, I would have received what was mine with interest. So take the talent from him, give it to the one with 10 talents. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.'" Praise to you, the gospel of the Lord. You may be seated. You know, this is one of those parables, and we get another one next week, where I could tiptoe around it. I could make you feel really good about what he said, because how many of you come to church because you want to feel warm and fuzzy inside, and when you leave, you know that you've been forgiven, you've been fed, everything's right with the world, and you know, you just jump out and leap for joy with that news. And then you get a lesson like this, and you're like, "Pastor, why do we have to read these lessons? They don't make me feel good." Well, we have to read them because they're honest. They're an honest assessment of the church. They're an honest assessment of our faith. We read them because it's better to know exactly where we stand in the eyes of the Lord than to basically deceive ourselves. And one of the things we also have to remember is that this lesson was not read or spoken to individuals. This was read and spoken to congregations. And I think the Lutheran Church today needs to pick up their ears, and I think we need to take a good close look at this parable and really listen to it. Because I'm going to tell you a story of 2 churches. And then I want you to kind of weigh where Mount Carmel fits in this narrative. And this isn't any 2 specific churches, you guys. This is the Lutheran Church as a whole. It is. Because in the Lutheran tradition, and especially all Lutheran churches, there's only been 2 times that the Lutheran Church has ever grown in America. 2 times. The first time, when how many of you have grandparents or great-grandparents that came through Ellis Island and ended up in the Midwest? An influx of immigrants made you grow. How many of you are baby boomers? That's the second time. No other time, right? No other time has the Lutheran Church in America, I don't care if it's the Missouri Synod Church, I don't care if it's I call it the Salty Church, the National Association of Lutheran Churches, and if you just play with it, it means salt. And I don't care if it's the ELCA. We have a problem with using our talents. We really do. You know, there's a word that gets batted around that the Lutherans are the frozen chosen. And I think it came from the Midwest, actually, because they're mostly from Minnesota. So they're usually pretty frozen about most of the year. And then it's just unbearably hot. So it's like here, it's either going to rain or it's going to be nice. But there, it's either going to be stifling hot or it's going to be freezing cold, which is why everybody moved this way. So my point is that I'm going to give you a parable of two actual churches, but they could be any two Lutheran churches anywhere. There's one church, took a good look around them and said, you know what we're doing ain't working. We need to figure out how to make this church be relevant, change people's lives, and be somehow in the community. We need to open up our doors. We need to take a good stock and a good inventory of what God gave us as talents. And we need to say, you know what? God gave us these talents freely. We're going to share our talents with you freely. And we're going to make it so people feel welcome when they walk in. They're going to feel welcome if they use our building. We're not going to give them a list of, first of all, we're not going to give them a bill, right? That says, if you want to use our space and utilize our talents, you have to pay for it, because we know that whatever we give back to God into the community, God's going to bless us back tenfold or twice, which this parable tells us, right? And they did that, and for a couple years, it didn't work quite right, but all of a sudden, a little bit of baptismal water, a little bit of wine, a little bit of bread, and a little bit of practice, and a little bit of good tending, it grew. Another church looked at all their talents and said, oh my gosh, if we use all these talents, we'll have nothing, right? If we start giving away these talents and we start utilizing it, what I can see, it's going to be gone. And so they said, what we have to do is we have to get the extra 5 talents. We need the extra talent. We need to figure out how to get that instead of waiting for God to give it to us. We're going to figure out how we can grasp it, like, kind of like Adam and Eve grasped the apple. We're going to take on this role. We're going to be successful in it. And you know what? Every time somebody used their building, they said, hey, make sure you lock up, make sure you clean up, and by the way, here's the bill for it, right? Because they were like, look at our budget, it's not working. It's just not going to make ends meet. So they went and they dug their hole and they claimed their stake, they did everything they can. And you want to know what happened? The more they grasped, the more they grubbed for it, the more they went for it, the less money they had. And now they're closed. There is no church. Somebody else will buy their church. Somebody else will do what they're supposed to do in that building, and somehow that church will grow. The other church grew. Never, ever had to struggle to make a payment. Never worried about their budget because things happened, things moved. God blessed them, God graced them, and that's how it all came about. And now in that community, there's one Lutheran church and not 2. Right? That's how grace works, you guys. It's the complete opposite of what we think it should do. You can't panic. You can't stop and think, oh, we need to do X, and we need to do Y, and we need to do Z to make sure that we're solvent. We need to do this to make sure it all works together. And when you do it like that and you don't give it back over to God and trust that God will bless you, you will die. And we read the end of these parables and you hear weeping and gnashing of teeth, and it gets you a little scared, right? But I think it's actually sadder than that. Because what actually happens is you just go out with a whimper. To me, that's worse. I would rather have weeping and gnashing of teeth instead of just irrelevance. You're just gone. And I'm not saying that Mount Carmel is in either of those camps. I'm saying Mount Carmel has to make a choice to be in one of those camps. So how do you do it? How do you take the talents that God gives us as individuals and utilize it then as a congregation? And I'm going to say the first thing, you guys, all those little posters up there aren't just so that you can do something for yourself. It's so you can do something for the congregation. And in serving the congregation, then you serve the community. And when you serve the community, you're investing the talents that God gave you, and then God will make that grow. But you know what it takes? Trust. It really does. It takes risk. It takes risking, and yeah, just like the guy who dug the hole and buried his one talent because he was afraid, I'm going to guarantee the one that took that guy's 5 talents and went and invested it and knew that it could fail was just as afraid, but he took the risk. And the one that did the 2 took the risk. So we have to ask ourselves, are we going to be afraid and bury our talents, or are we going to take the risk and invest them? And I don't know what that would look like. I really don't. God will show us what that will look like. That's part of the trust thing. I think the ELCA and the Lutheran Church has the best talent in the world. I do. You are justified by grace alone, through faith alone, through Christ. No strings attached. I don't care if that's the only talent we have. That's the best one. But now we need to figure out, how do we risk it and invest it? How do we make that talent be 2 talents or 4 talents or 10 talents? And it only works when we put that talent to good use through God's plan. We can't be afraid. Because if we're afraid of failure, then we've already lost. Let's be bold and see where God's taking us. Look over there, sign up for something, be something bigger than yourself. Invest the talents that God gave us as individuals so that we as a congregation can grow and flourish. And let's not go out like a whimper, but let's live with a bang. Amen.